Well, Nigeria's power sector is in the spotlight this week on Arise News. You'd have seen the news earlier in the week. It's been quite busy. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission approved an increase in electricity tariffs for consumers under the Band A classification, which will see those consumers paying 225 naira kilowatt per hour from the current 66 naira in a bid to attract new investment and cut electricity subsidies of about $2.3 billion. The development comes at the same time as the announcement by Nigeria's Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority of an increase in the price of natural gas, which is used to generate more than 70% of Nigeria's power sector. Those affected by the tariff hikes are said to represent about 15% of the 12 million electricity customers in the country. Meanwhile, that figure of 12 million is a very low number in a country of 200 million people who have access to electricity. The country has 12,500 megawatts of installed capacity, but produces only about a quarter of that, leaving many Nigerians reliant, of course, on expensive diesel and sometimes petrol-powered generators. Last year, the government also moved to decentralize the electricity markets to incentivize the private sector and improve efficiency. The question is, can any type of reform in Nigeria's electricity market satisfy both the supply side and the demand side? And what do experts think about the impact of these latest developments? Hopefully, I don't have to answer all these questions myself, because I'm joined by one of Nigeria's foremost legal minds in the power sector, Dolapo Kukoyi, who is co-managing partner of Detail Commercial Solicitors, and of course, the brilliant Sholabomi Oreagba, General Manager Fulfillment and Corporate Services at Viathan Group, a provider of captive and embedded power solutions in Nigeria. Thanks for joining me on the show, ladies. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very heavy topic because everybody's talking about electricity tariffs, but there's so much more to it. Now, the last time you were on our show, we had talked about some of the coming policy developments. We've since had the full enactment of the Act, Electricity Markets Act. Tell us about what has happened in the sector since then, Dolapo.
Well, I would say things were moving slowly because understandably, and thanks again, Rolake, for having me. A pleasure to be here and to be on the hot seat today.
Yeah.
But, slowly things have been moving because what the Electricity Act and the Constitutional Amendment portends, it's something that is, would I say, quite revolutionary for a sector that has been regulated by a solo regulator. But that said, there have been movements, there have been things happening. One is that NERC has somewhat taken charge.
That's the electricity regulator.
Yes, that's the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, has taken charge of basically gathering stakeholders and trying to chart forward a roadmap for how the Electricity Act and the Constitutional Amendment will then be implemented. So that's one. But then, interestingly, we've had another amendment to the Act, though I would say quite a small one, but impactful. Impactful in the sense that it impacts on the bottom line of generation companies. So there in the Act did have provisions that allow for hydro-producing generation companies to contribute to what is called the Hyperdeck Fund. That is the fund basically around hydropower producing areas or communities. So that fund was supposed to be to cater for those communities. So initially it was 10% for hydro gencos to be able to contribute to those communities, but that seems to have been reduced. So it's hydro gencos on one side and it's gencos on another side. The generation companies generally. Generation companies, that amendment now says 5% from your operating revenues.
Okay.
But it's not clear whether that also includes the hydro gencos. So
right.
that's still up in the air. And then we then have some other amendments to do with how that money is managed, what goes into it. Apart from that, states have also been busy. Well, I think still slow. We've had a few states who have enacted their laws. I think we have Oyo, we have Ondo, we have Oyo, we have Ondo, yes, and we have Enugu. Now, we also have Ekiti State. Ekiti State has gone beyond enacting its law. It's giving notice to NERC of its intention to take over regulatory powers because that's the process.
Okay.
And then we have some states like Osun, Lagos, Edo, Rivers, who are still in the process. But largely, maybe that's
pretty much it, yeah.
Yeah. And
That's a lot to unpack, and we've been seeing some interesting. Even Abia State has really been pushing with this sort of independent power producers
right.
and trying to take charge of its own destiny.
That's right.
And we'll come back to a bit of that. But speaking of states, I know that Sholabomi Viathan Group does a lot of independent and captive projects within the states. From a private sector perspective, how have some of these policy developments impacted your ability to deliver your solutions to these states and communities?
Thank you, Rolake, for having me. So what Viathan does at the moment is for us to provide power or our solutions to commercial customers, we have to collaborate with the discos to exist in their franchise areas. So we have to collaborate to support commercial and wholesale industrial customers in those areas. But what this act does for us as a company is, as it allows the states to create their own electricity markets, thereby giving them the authority or just the wherewithal to own the whole value chain of the electricity market. What it does for Viathan is we are now able to go into states across the country as they enact. So as Dolapo said, few of them have started, they've signed into law. The process goes further than just signing. But once they are able to go into the process, go to NERC, the regulator, and give them the 45 days notice so that they own it. What this does for us is we are able to quickly deploy, we are able to expand and scale up our solutions across the country, so we become nationwide without the encumbrances that we face right now with the discos and franchise area ownership. Essentially, with the current regulation before the act takes effect. Enacted. So basically, we are still on that path, but we are looking forward to the act being implemented in this way so that we are able to quickly start scaling up, put our footprints across the country. But because essentially we've always thought that our place is to supplement the discos. You're not able to meet all of the demands.
So supplement rather than compete.
We are not looking to compete. We don't even have the capacity to essentially compete. Course. But there are markets, there are viable clusters, opportunities around where people want reliable power. Even when the disco is available, the quality just might not be what they want. And so that's where we come in. And so that ability to compete in that way and quickly be able to provide our solutions to viable states or viable businesses within those states. We're looking forward to it.
That's very interesting because it's not just about even servicing off-grid areas, but areas that are underserviced from the grid. So Dolapo, you mentioned something earlier about states being able to regulate under this new act.
Yes.
Can states, are they mirroring a NERC at state level and able to set tariffs? So what does actually a state having that decentralization means a state can regulate electricity within its own borders?
That's right. So a state can regulate electricity within its borders and its transmission, its distribution, its generation. You can actually regulate and you are mandated. So part of that process is that when a state says, goes to NERC and gives a notice, what is giving a notice of is that I've established my law and I've also established a regulatory commission.
Okay. So, which will include the fixing and setting of tariffs?
Oh, everything.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So it will be everything. So it will be interesting to see how this dynamic will work with the recent
change. But we'll come to that a bit later. I want to talk a bit, just a segue to the changing revision of the gas prices upwards. I think it's something the industry has been waiting for a while. It also, gas, but 70% of our power sector is fueled by gas, right? So this is pretty significant for power sector end users and businesses that supply power. What do you make of this price change in gas? Is this now bringing that space to more commercial viability? Are we likely to see more investors or operators coming?
I would say that I don't envisage any huge changes solely because of this hike. And the reason
the hike in the gas price.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
This increase in gas price, because this increase in gas price is more a matter of course. The law already provides that NMDPRA would review prices, and it's based on certain parameters. Now, the other thing is, what are the sectors that it covers? It's really strategic sector. And strategic sector is power. It is what is called commercial and gas-based industries. Now, it's quite limited, and I was only just having a discussion before this with Shola Bumi that, okay, are you buying gas at this price?
Yeah.
You know, so it's more an upstream play.
Okay.
And it's more an upstream play for the if I use power, for example, it's more an upstream play for the power sector.
The generation comes from buying gas from upstream producers.
The bigger ones, yes. And those are not the privatized ones. I don't even imagine that Azura is getting gas at this price. And Azura is privately financed, you know, our only privately financed IPP. So it's yet to be seen how that is going to determine. But is there potential for growth? Yes, definitely. Absolutely. From many, many perspectives. I mean, for what Viathan does, for example, and many others who usually really use CNG at the moment, there's huge potential. What I'm hoping will happen is that this increase in price will free up perhaps gas to the commercial space to feed people like Viathan, who do CNG and who also do, you know, virtual
LNG
gas.
or other types of gas
and gas pipelines. But the key thing is this: if you look at those segments, commercial and gas-based are the more profitable ones, I would say, or the more viable ones. That power sector is still the issue, because as long as it's not able to pay its bills and even pay its outstandings.
Well, but then the complement is that the tariff hike presumably will allow the power sector to pay its bills. I'm playing devil's advocate.
I get you.
But if you see what I mean.
No, yeah. I get you. But we then need to look at that tariff hike in a holistic sense.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Yes. Shola Bumi, before we get into the hot topic of this, which is around the tariff hike, you know, you're doing a lot of independent power projects off-grid. You're providing alternative solutions. Given all these policy movements in the sector, does any of this even impact you? I mean, she talked about maybe you buying gas from the upstream suppliers, but you're essentially working in spite of regulation and in spite of government. Isn't that what your solutions are providing? So,
absolutely. And like Dolapo said, we were talking about it. Regardless of all of these things, we are finding our way to continue to exist in spite of all of the regulations that essentially, I'll say, doesn't favor independent power producers. Well, I was just saying, in Lagos State, there was a resource document that was done that showed how much of the population was powered by the grid and how much was done by self-generation. And a bigger percentage is just self-generation. So on that premise, you would expect that things like gas pricing, when you're talking about strategic customers, people that provide that meet the gap that the grid or the other sources do not meet, you'll be considered in that gas pricing. So regarding gas pricing, we are still engaging and looking for ways that we are able to get these prices that also allows us compete efficiently. But to your point around inflection, what this means for us, I think that generally what the changes or the tariff, or I'll say that the policies and development that's happened right now, what it does is it begins to close the gap between the grid, as at today, Band A, but between the grid pricing or costs and other sources of energy.
Right.
And so once that gas closes, we are moving to
grid parity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially, we are moving to a cost-reflexive tariff regime. And what that does, like for the GenCos, to your point, is once the DISCOs are able to, without issues around collection, it cascades, and so everyone is able to pay their bill, and supply should be better around from the GenCos to the DISCOs. They'll be able to invest or reinvest. And on the demand side, I think that customers now will have options. You're able to pick your supplier, your source, your preferred source based on quality, reliability,
and competitiveness of the pricing that they offer,
essentially, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what this kind of does from our perspective.
Yeah, interesting. So Dolapo, you know, this tariff hike, you mentioned that right now it's Band A. I kind of feel that maybe this is a way of testing the market and market reaction by introducing this at the top end of the market, that hike at the top end of the market, Band A, even though we've heard that some people have been downgraded to Band B because of supply issues. So tell me your assessment of how this will impact the sector.
I think first things first, I think that this is a move towards cost reflectivity. In fact, if you know that there was actually a tariff review done in January, even though it was frozen.
Yes.
So there was a tariff review that actually gave some proposed tariffs. And the highest proposed tariff, I used ECO and Ikeja. In that tariff review was for ECO about 117 under Band A, and for Ikeja 148. Now, that was supposed to be close to cost reflective, even though the review acknowledged that it wasn't totally cost reflective. Now, 225 is totally
cost reflective.
You are talking market. You are talking market price. Because a lot of us who live in estates in Lagos, for example, know that we are paying the upwards of 200s at the moment. And what are we doing? We are doing a combination, most times,
diesel,
a combination of diesel
and the grid.
Sometimes some people won't have a
so it's a blended tariff.
It's blended.
Yes.
So a lot of people are already paying that. But it's, unfortunately, this a lot of people I'm saying are still the 5%.
Yes, of course.
Or the 2%, you know, we are still the disappearing, you know, middle class. So what would be what's the impact of this? On the demand side, I think there will be more adjustments by customers. I think people like you
people
and I,
adjust.
we're
already doing
start
so.
to put off freezer. Sometimes we'll start to do things like we'll be more conscious about how we use our energy. We'll be more energy efficient. Some of us will balk at this and just totally go off grid because we just don't see any sense to it. You know, there will also be accountability. You know,
because now supplies now need to be stable, need to be efficient. People will demand more in terms of service.
I mean, with all that's going on in the country now, I'm sure that you all know that we are more insistent on, if I'm paying for something, I must see it. Because money is hard to come by these days. So a lot of people are going to be, and the distribution companies will then have to have control on supply side of how that power gets to Band A customers. It can't be grid controlled where they don't have control.
Yeah.
They would have to find ways to either be doing bilaterals where they have control over how the infrastructure works and is not controlled by someone that they cannot basically either penalize or make them pay back end for the issues, the service levels that would have failed on their side. And I'm hoping we'll see more embedded generation.
Yeah, and speaking of which, you know, I'm thinking about renewables because I know Viathan has also expanded into renewables. This provides an ample opportunity for alternative sources to become part and parcel of our infrastructure framework in the power sector. What opportunities do you see very quickly for renewable energy to really take off in this market?
So, like I said, with that inflection point in pricing, you begin to see that the unit cost for renewables start becoming more attractive. Yes. And so in the past where renewables was way ahead of the alternatives, with this you see that the unit cost for renewables, it's already in that range for individual households. Well, at scale, at commercial levels, that number begin to make sense. So you begin to see that companies or businesses like ours integrate renewables into our energy mix to some extent. Even the law requires some level of diversity in your generated capacity. And so as the renewables become more attractive, funding is better available, businesses become innovative around R&Ds and how you embed it into your generation. So even DISCOs now, they are doing partnerships with renewable energy companies so that they are also able to diversify their mix, blend the tariff. This Band A, what essentially does for renewables is it brings renewable to the table at scale.
As a realistic prospect. A lot of people will now be approaching renewable energy companies to ask about options for services. But very quickly, we've run out of time. We've got just 1 minute. We started with Band A, Dolapo. Are we going to see moving to more commercially acceptable pricing? But we haven't talked about the impact on the bottom of the pyramid, which will come as we expand this increase. What do you anticipate the regulators will do over the next few months, years? Very quickly, briefly,
I think that we will, because just having Band A is unsustainable as far as I'm concerned. It can't pay for the rest of the value chain. That's one. there's also the impact on government's revenues.
Okay.
So we will see.
We will see.
An increase,
Yeah.
but it's dependent on a lot of things.
Yeah, of course.
Infrastructure has to improve.
Absolutely.
Supply has to improve. So that whole commerciality and viability of the sector becomes even top issue now.
Thank you. We're going to call you back for a part 2 discussion because this is such a topical issue. Sholabomi Oreagba of Viathan Group and Dolapo Kokoyi, co-managing partner of Detail Commercial Solicitors. Thank you, ladies, for coming on the show. Great discussion.